Good morning. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition, now streaming on Roku TV's network. And on this show, I greet you live from the All-America city of Morrisville in North Carolina, the 8th largest state in the United States of America. And we, on this show, wherever you are in the world, we talk about global affairs, innovation. We give you daily updates on the war in Ukraine, and we're going to talk about that today. And a continued discussion of the new normal. But today, I'm going to break away from my tradition of monologues. We're going to talk today about the war in Ukraine. We're going to talk about President Biden's extending forgiveness on loans. We're going to talk about other domestic issues as we prepare for elections in another month here in North Carolina and around the country. But I'm going to begin today wearing my green jacket and my green shirt to talk about the remarkable comeback of Tiger Woods. I did not know about the news until this morning, so I wasn't able to put it in my breaking news part of my city newsletter, which I send every week or two. But it's really been remarkable to wake up this morning and know that the greatest golfer that ever lived, most likely, who we thought we would never see again after that awful car accident about a year ago, would be putting and teeing off today at 10 in the morning at the Masters. Apparently, Tiger's injuries were so bad that even amputation was considered. And he has so many pins and wires and so much pain and trauma that his body had to go through. But he would not give up on his dream of being on the stage which he loves so much, the game of golf. I love watching the greats in our game play. Tom Brady, Pete Sampras, the Williams sisters, and now in tennis, Rafael Nadal, Djokovic, Federer, great champions from all the sports. But to see this remarkable comeback to me is a story of resilience. Resilience, in my words, in my opinion, is not only how you bounce back, but how you bounce forward. And I can't think of a better inspiration than the Tiger Woods comeback story. For me, as I was running this morning, it made me think that, no matter how down we are, no matter what life throws our way, no matter how much the chips are down and the odds are against us, we can reach for the impossible dream. And I started thinking, what song represents this as I run to songs on my iTunes when I run? Well, I was thinking of I'm Still Standing by Elton John. Dream the Impossible Dream from Man from La Mancha. Or One Moment in Time by Whitney Houston. Or Not Throwing Away My Shot from Alexander Hamilton. Those were the four songs I ran to. But I want to thank Tiger Eldridge Woods for giving me that motivation. We look forward to a great Masters, and maybe, just maybe, we'll see the great one wear the green jacket one more time. Wouldn't that be something? Now let's get started. I'm going to bring on with us today Mark Lee.
Glad to be here with you. I think we've got Nick with us as well. So
and Nick, yes, and the other folks.
Yeah, we got Nick
Sasha Star.
Full house.
As
And
well.
for those of you listening, I do want to do it. I should have done it in my opening, but I do want to apologize to Sasha Star. I, like many people, he is an immigrant from the former Soviet Union, but he is from Ukraine. And Sasha, I apologize because it is confusing for some of us. So you did immigrate from the Soviet Union, and I made the mistake of saying Russia. So I learned from that. And
even though Ukraine still existed at the time when I immigrated and many years before that, but it was a part of Soviet Union.
Yeah, that's where sometimes it gets confusing. So.
Although, very interestingly enough, only two republics, Ukraine and Belarus, had their seats on United Nations, besides Soviet Union itself. So even Russian Federation, which was part of the Soviet Union, but it didn't have seat on United Nations. Soviet Union had, Ukraine and Belarus. Why is that? I can't explain that. You have to go back to Stalin or probably Brezhnev and some other Führers to find out why was that. It's just so illogical. It's just like incredible stupidity to arrange it that way. But that's how it was.
You know something
Yes.
interesting, Steve, that I found out? I know we had the Secretary of State on yesterday, and I was going through doing some filing and other things, and I found out that I did not know this, that apparently there is a healthcare directive registry. That's actually one of the things that I found, and it is actually authorized by the North Carolina Department of the Secretary of State. So that is a directive that is out there that allows you to have the healthcare power of attorney, declaration of a desire if you want to have a natural death and a bunch of other things. So I did not realize that that fell, even some of the stuff around living wills, that fell under the purview of the Secretary of State. But as I was reading and I actually saw Elaine's name on the back of and her picture on the back of this thing. But yes, it's an advanced healthcare directive registry, and that is done under their auspices. So it's interesting
Well,
that
yeah, that's
the
fantastic.
Secretary of
Let's
State
even-
has power over.
Well, it was a wonderful interview. Before we begin in terms of our updates on the war and different things we're going to talk about today, I just want to just get, I changed my monologue last minute, and some of my best monologues I come to me when I run or swim, and that one came to me on my 4th mile this morning. But I hope you enjoyed it, and but I'll tell you, it's quite exciting to see this remarkable comeback. I hope he's going to be okay, but I don't know what your thoughts are, Mark and Nick,
Well,
about.
no, I definitely looking forward to seeing whether Tiger can pull off another one. He's gone through a lot. He had that devastating injury, but even he himself, I was reading an article on him recently, was saying that what he went through was mild compared to what the legendary Ben Hogan went through, because of course there's more advanced technology in medicine and other things. And Ben Hogan was actually in an accident with his wife at the time and everything. So definitely that was several decades ago. But even Tiger was saying that he's looking forward to competing. There was a lot of speculation as to when he would make that announcement, and yes, he has now said that he is ready to go. He does know that it will be a challenge. I think he compared it to something that you have been involved in, which is running and the marathon. So he did compare it to that, and definitely I'm looking forward to seeing how he does and whether he succeeds. He is definitely, chasing a great standard in what Jack Nicklaus and others did. And he was even saying that if he had not come back, he would be satisfied with the amount of victories that he has had and all. But that, as he put it, he does not come back unless he feels that he's got a good shot of winning. So, like I said, he is feeling very confident in the articles that I was reading and everything. But it'll be interesting to see what happens and if his mental confidence and his physical ability match each other, and if he's able to pull off this historical win and all of that, and whether he decides to stay on the circuit also. But Nick, any thoughts about Tiger and his efforts to take another green jacket?
Forget it. I don't think he's going to get a green jacket. I think he's happy to walk the course, really, if he's going to be able to walk the course. Because remember, he's been playing a little off and on, but he's been taking golf carts. The real problem to play at that high elite level, you have to have all cylinders working, and you have to be a little lucky. And I don't think he's got the cylinders working yet at that level. So the good news is he's actually showing up, because you know that a lot of the people at the Masters that they play, even Jack Nicklaus will sometimes go out and play, but he knows he can't compete at that level. It's just not going to happen. But it's more ceremonial than anything. And so I think what he's going to do is mainly become an ambassador for the sport, which is what Jack Nicklaus did for years after he gave up playing professionally. For the chess players in this room, there's Sasha, a guy named Garry Kasparov, basically quit at age 50 and became a ambassador to the sport. Every now and then he tried to make comebacks, but you just don't have it. And Tiger Woods, between his back injuries, his knee, his leg, I mean, come on. I mean, could you imagine if Rafael Nadal had injured his leg and goes, "I'm going to do a comeback in tennis, Steve." Okay, well, wait a minute. Tennis, you have to run the
Well, he's
court.
come back from a lot of injuries as well, so we just don't
Yeah,
know.
but
At
not
least
as severe as Tiger.
it's good to see him back though, and you know, but anyway, let's shift over now to our talks of the day. So my quick update on Ukraine is, you know, Ukraine is bracing for Russian attacks in the east and south. Ukrainian officials are telling people to evacuate 3 provinces near the Russian border where Putin's troops are shifting their focus. And investigators in Bucha have found evidence of torture before death, beheading and dismemberment, and the burning of corpses. And Germany said it intercepted radio conversations of Russian soldiers discussing the killings. I'm sorry, this just makes me sick to my stomach. And, you know, I'm going to start with Sasha, but, you know, President Zelensky went to the UN and has said that, you know, they need to take more serious action with the Security Council, banning Russia from being on that Security Council, and then also condemning Putin for war criminals. How can we not say that war crimes are being committed when I read these things? And I got to be honest with you, I'm feeling very sick to my stomach right now.
The accent should not be on the war crimes anymore. They are not normal people. They are completely brainwashed and indoctrinated. They're like robots who are just doing whatever. I'm not even sure that, it's very difficult to imagine that Putin would told his generals to indiscriminately kill and torture people in Ukraine and so on. So they probably gave orders on their own, also hard to imagine. So it went all the way down to mid officers and then finally to soldiers, and all of them did exactly this atrocities. But you know what? It's not. It's not really that interesting anymore. What is interesting, whether West will deliver to Ukraine heavy weapons. That's the main question. Because otherwise whining and the torture, there are the war criminals. What can you do with war criminals who are in a fortress, Moscow, that you cannot penetrate, you cannot get there? Okay, so it's useless. Just forget about all that. You have to defeat Russians on the field. And so far, Russians are avoiding direct confrontation with Ukrainian forces because Ukrainians are much better fighters. They are much better know how to use complicated war systems. And if they will have in a short order all the heavy artillery, tanks, warplanes, and heavy missiles against the warships, that's it. The war is done.
Speaking of the war being done, I really wish that our former president would be quiet because apparently he's still having interviews and still having conversations and trying to put himself in the middle of this whole conversation, because recently he just said that Putin overplayed his hand by invading Ukraine. And of course, we know that in the past, he praised Putin's justification for the invasion as savvy and genius. That's his words, not mine, and everything. And now he is definitely saying that a lot of people are surprised. I think they're very impressed with Ukraine, but they're not impressed with NATO and what NATO is doing, because a lot of people think NATO could be doing more. And of course, we know that he was never a big fan of NATO. So I was just wondering, what are your thoughts when, and I know you're not a big fan of him either, Sasha, but what are your thoughts when this man that might be trying to run for office again is trying to put himself in the middle of this whole conversation and even saying some things that folks might say are praising Mr. Putin?
Obama's running for office again?
No.
Trump.
Trump?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, at least when he's at the White House as the president, he doesn't have former presidents coming in and ignoring him. That might be one stand. Oh, good morning, everybody. How are you?
Oh, our friend from Australia has arrived.
But I mean,
how you doing, mate? You guys
I'm good. This is my friend Cheryl.
Oh, finally, you have got some decent friends. That's good.
So Cheryl, These guys here, where am I, Darian? These guys here are all political analysts, for lack of better description, and they're trying to work out who would be the better president, Joe Biden or anybody of the other 7 billion people that exist on the planet.
Okay, they're trying to work that out.
Joe Biden is our fearless leader.
I can tell you my opinion. Would you like my opinion?
We would like your opinion.
Sure, let's hear it from you. You get.
Oh
your
no, I don't know enough about
No,
it.
you get your 15 minutes of fame. That's
She
what
does, but she doesn't want to say.
Oh, okay. Well, that's probably for the best, I guess.
Well, since we got Shaquille here, can I just divert slightly to and everything, because there's been a major campaign that's folks, and I'd love to hear particularly from our lawyer friends, and I think I mentioned to you when we had a meeting recently and everything, but there is a state in North Carolina that has apparently done some very major laws with abortion. So Oklahoma's abortion law, some folks are saying, could be the most cruel yet for women, according to some healthcare providers and all of that. But definitely, I'd love to hear what folks' thoughts are about this law that has been passed that is a near total abortion ban. And some people, including some of the news media, are calling it the most restrictive in the nation. And definitely, they're saying things along both what's happening there and in Texas. But I'd love to hear folks' thoughts about this, and does this mean the end of abortion as we know it?
Supreme Court issue, Mark. So the thing is, we're going to have to defer. This is what I like about Elaine Marshall. When you get a subject matter that no matter what you say, you can't really do anything about, defer to the person who can do something about, which in this case is the Supreme Court of the United States. At the end of the day, it's going to be up to the Supreme Court of the United States to either rule or not rule the law to be constitutional or unconstitutional. So it really doesn't matter what Oklahoma says. It's what the Supreme Court says. And I think that's what we're just going to have to wait for, is to see what they say, if they say anything at all. You know?
Yeah.
Which, if they don't say anything at all, then the law stands. So they have to speak on it eventually.
But I mean, this sounds like a very interesting law, because apparently the Oklahoma bill would make performing an abortion a felony, subject to a potential 10-year prison term, except in cases where it's necessary to save the life of a pregnant woman in a medical emergency.
There's no way the Supreme Court will uphold that. I have enough faith.
You know, the thing is, the composition of the Supreme Court has changed. You have Amy Coney Barrett, or whatever her name is, on the Supreme Court, and they have an anti-abortion stance, but it will wait to see what happens, because you also have an old-standing Roe versus Wade, case that's out there, but it's not it's not our decision, unfortunately, not their decision, whether they know it or not, to make. It's going to be up to the Supreme Court, and they're going to have to really, take a look at it, because I heard the arguments of women's right to choose, but then I also heard the counter arguments. What about the baby's rights? Do they have any rights at all? So you have countervailing interest in this particular case.
I'm glad you said that, Nick, because I was listening to an argument in Clubhouse. I know it's been way too much time in there, and that's partially what the argument was at what point is a baby
viable, and that was basically the Supreme Court's initial decision on Roe versus Wade. They said, well, since they're viable outside the womb, then at that point in time they have rights. So you have to look at that, and that's how Roe was decided. Now, here's the problem, Mark. As science increases and the viability increases to a earlier age, in other words, it's not 9, it may not be 5 months, it's 4 months, 3 months. In other words, all of a sudden it's viable at inception. Then all of a sudden you got a real tangible problem here, because there's another less restrictive alternative. And let's give you a scientific idea. Somebody's impregnated. Okay, we have a choice. A, abortion. B, take the fetus out, put it into a test tube, and let it grow. Okay. Now you got a real problem here. So science is also going to weigh in on these decisions. So
hold on a second. Nick, a couple of things. One is, could we be in the middle of a civil war, because they're saying that 26 states are likely to ban abortion in some way if the Supreme Court rules against Roe? So
what absolute nonsense! What absolute nonsense! Once again, absolute nonsense. What they've talked about is a heartbeat rule. Okay, which actually brings US abortion rules into something which is similar to the worldwide consensus. So unless you're going to try and say that those left-wing countries that all you love so much, like Sweden and Denmark, are oppressing women, this argument is absolute nonsense. And it's only the nonsense that would be believed by the insular Americans that sit there and listen to that nonsense.
Okay, which argument is nonsense, counselor? What are you talking about?
So if you're going to go with the Texas heartbeat rule, right, that's the thing that everyone's kicked up about a few months ago.
Yeah.
That rule would only bring in the American abortion rules into something similar to what is going on in Denmark, Sweden, Germany, etc. Are you going to try and tell me that those countries are oppressing women? America is a great bastion of feminism? Because if it is, then you might want to admit that America is a great bastion of feminism rather than being this sexist, racist country that you guys all claim it is.
I mean, this is where I really have told my friends in the Democratic Party I actually have to move away from them, which is one reason I don't want to be a member of any party, because they are so right to choose. And it's a slogan. It's a middle school slogan, really. And it doesn't bring the facts to the table at all, and doesn't bring the science to the table at all. So this is where the Democrats all of a sudden move away from science, and it's on the abortion issue, and it really drives me nuts, because you got to look at the science on this. If you have a viable human being outside the womb, and this is what the Supreme Court was saying, and like I said, you got a lady comes in, I want an abortion, I have my right to choose, and there's wait a minute. We can remove the fetus and put it in a test tube, let's say, and it grows to, a person. Doesn't that person have a right to choose also as well? So stop the slogans. Now here comes the counter argument. Well, they're going to have a bad life anyway because they're going to be poor like me. Okay.
Nick, there's sorry to interject. Sorry to interject, but that's not the argument that deserves a counter argument. Nobody is suggesting. Okay, even the hardcore Republicans that you despise so much, none of them are suggesting that they should be put into test tubes and grown. What they're saying is that when the heartbeat starts beating, it's alive. But that's what they're saying.
But wait a minute, that may not be true. I don't care what they're saying.
Well, it may. Okay, so it may or may not be true. It may or may not be true. But if you're on the Supreme Court, your job is first and foremost and primarily should be 90% restricted to interpreting things in line with the Constitution. And when the Democrats want to sit there and start, putting people on there because of the color of their skin, or putting people on there because they're going to be activist judges, you're not supposed to be an activist judge. You're supposed to be somebody who's going to jump up and interpret the Constitution. So Amy Coney Barrett, who you just had a crack at, she did not. As much as the Democrats accused her and said that she would take Trump's side, she voted against Trump when he challenged the election results. But can you name a time when Democrats will vote against Democrat appointees, vote against Democrat talking points?
Okay, time out, counselor. First of all, you said the Supreme Court decided on race and sex to be a member. That is absolutely not true. Okay, it was Joe Biden who made the decision that I'm going to have a black woman on the Supreme Court.
I did not say the Supreme Court nominated. I didn't say the Supreme Court was responsible for that. What I said was the Democrats nominated somebody to the Supreme Court because of the color of their skin.
But the bottom line is,
but it wasn't the Democrats. Let's get specific, counselor. It was Joe Biden.
Let's shift to the next.
When it was Joe Biden.
Let's shift to the next issue, because we could spend an hour on right to life versus choice. But at the end of the day, I'll sum up with this, and then we're going to get into the next issue about. I want to get your opinion about the Cuban immigrants, about 32,000 coming in the border. Cuba's really been hit hard with the pandemic. And then President Trump, they found some evidence that he did say he would go into the Capitol if he was given the chance on January 6th. But my take on it is this. You have state legislatures that are doing their best to legislate, these very very contentious issues, and the court has a tough decision to make. They've got to be jurists, and so it's really going to come down to the court upholding these laws or striking down these laws based on constitutionality and precedent. And if they were good jurists, that's what we're going to do. But I do agree with Nick P.O.D. What we're seeing, particularly with these three new justices, Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, and Gorsuch, they tend to be voting more in line with what these legislators are doing, which is, voting rights and abortion laws. So, but hopefully they can be jurists and they can make decisions based on the constitutionality of these decisions.
But and
They're
apparently
not. They're not voting. They're not voting in line with what the legislators want. They're voting in line with the Constitution. You have a 10th Amendment for a reason. Okay, the federal government has absolutely no right whatsoever, unless you guys are going to try and change the Constitution or change your amendments. They have absolutely no right whatsoever to try to take away from the state legislature the rules that apply to the voting rules.
But Shaquille,
This
I have a
is
question for
always
you.
something that's been determined by the
Because
state.
I know that you want to get to other issues and everything, but I was going to bring up another issue that's similar to that, where sometimes the legislators have accidental consequences. There's a state to the west of us, meaning those of us that are here in North Carolina, named Tennessee, and they were trying to make some laws around same-sex marriages, and it almost became an issue around the age consent. And there were some people that got very upset about this because they were thinking that they were going to have more child brides. So they then changed the law, and they are still trying to make the law fit in some kind of way that will, some people in the LGBTI community are concerned that it could still impact them, but the whole original purpose of the law, because they were going to make it the original law was going to be very loose about the children laws, and they caught that. The Republicans did, and they were like, oops, we're about to make a mistake. We can't do that, because they were getting ready to get a whole lot of flack.
I suppose that what is bringing this part of your conversation up, Mark, is what's happening in Tennessee. Now,
It is,
look,
exactly.
Now, look, these sorts of laws need to be looked at, but they are still not the responsibility of the federal government. Okay, these rules were delegated to the states upon joining the union. Okay, and just like when the northern thugs came down and forced the southern states to stay in the union, and Abraham Lincoln did what he did to force those southern states to stay in the union, the fact of the matter is that there is a 10th Amendment in your country for a reason. If you don't like it, then you should go out there and try to get 60%, 66% of the states to agree so that you can change these rules. But to sit there and instead say, we're going to essentially try to manipulate the law by putting judges onto the Supreme Court who aren't going to follow the Constitution, which is their sole role. We're not going to follow the Constitution. What we're going to do instead is we're going to be activist judges. That is absolutely absurd.
And remember,
should courts be making moral decisions? Because hold on a second. But should courts be making moral decisions? Because what it was saying was that it was the marriage, which I know a lot of people believe, and I can understand that it's between a man and a woman, and that part of what was going on in Tennessee as well. So that's why some of the LGBTI community is concerned, because they're going like, wait a minute, we had some rights that we were granted, and now y'all are saying it has to be done the more traditional way and all of that, and y'all are trying to legislate it. So those kind of things be legislated.
How horrible for religious and conservative states to hang on to traditional values. Oh, heaven help us. What we need to do is put activist judges on the Supreme Court instead to deal with it. Unfortunately, gentlemen, I'm going to have to love you and leave you. I'll hopefully come on in 15 minutes.
All right. Yeah, I don't know why you're wearing a mask. I thought Australia was the land of freedom.
Because I'm in a car service. I'm in West Australia. I'm in the state of West Australia, which is run by a very, very left-wing political party called the Labor Party. And unlike the rest of the country, we have to wear masks when we're singing a bloody car service.
Oh, really? Okay.
But I'll talk to you guys when I get back to the hotel.
Makes sense. Stay away from COVID.
So on to the next issue. So we haven't talked much about Cuba. My daughter is actually a UNC school journalism major, and she is she's welcoming refugees, and she says that Title 42 has really been out of hand, and that there's just lots of immigrants coming in to the border, and they're just in really bad condition. But today I read in the Washington Post that about 32,000 Cubans are coming into the border. So this problem is getting worse. And my daughter and I were talking last night on the phone, and she just was bringing up a good point that really made me think that, we're not seeing the situation being handled any differently or better in terms of immigration from President Biden.
We're not.
So, yeah. And so that's a good point that she made. She's a bit concerned. And I'd like to bring her on the show. I don't know. She's very, very. Of course, I'm biased, but she's a journalism major, so maybe we can bring her on one day. Maybe bring her on next week. She'll be back in. So
I mean, the thing is, the immigration rules in the United States are incredibly stupid, and we can start with the fact there's no statute of limitations on the quote crime of immigrating in the United States. We can start with the other fact that our nation was built on immigrants. We can start with another fact: the statute of liberty says we welcome immigrants, when the fact was we don't. We can go to another fact: there are quotas. They're not quote racial quotas; they're country quotas, which in turn are racial quotas. Okay, so our immigration system is basically a complete lie. Maybe we should join the Soviet Union in terms of creating lies. As a matter of fact, this was one of the things that was pointed out to my friends in China. They go, well, atrocities were created by Americans also, and yeah, you have to condemn it from both sides. Well, this immigration system that we have isn't a system that even works for anybody. So we do have to reform it. We do have to put a statute of limitations on the illegal people, make them legal people here, and we actually have to close our borders and open our borders. What do I mean close and open? You do erect the wall. So I agree with Trump. Okay, but then at the same time, you have people that allow people in the country if they meet certain conditions, and give them a green cards as they come in, not put the hand out because they're from failed states in Latin America, which are run by drug lords, because the United States won't clean that up because we're too busy messing around with Ukraine. Ukraine's more important to us than the drug lords killing a bunch of people in El Salvador.
And Nick, I'm only being slightly sarcastic and everything, but how are you going to build the wall and everything when the majority of the workers that will be building the wall are actually Latin Americans? So I'm thinking, if I'm building a wall, am I actually going to build a wall to keep my own people out?
Mark, that's the reason I said bring them in. Okay, the people in Latin America actually work. I mean, let's bring them in. They're, when I hired a roofing company, guess who showed up? It's all the Hispanics. They showed up and they put the roof on. Okay, I mean, why are we denying these people the right to work here in the United States? I don't get it. When our whole country was built off immigration, we have very extremely poor immigration laws. So number one, what you do is you allow the people that have been here more than 5 years, they pass the statute of limitation, you put them on permanent status. Number two, you open up the doors. What are you coming in for? Well, I'm here coming in to work. You have any criminal record? No, I just want to work. Come in, here's your green card, baby. 5 years from now, you'll be a citizen as long as you don't get in any trouble. Come on, Mark.
Yeah, and I'm going to be. I wrote an op-ed. I wrote an op-ed that I'm going to be talking tomorrow. My monologue is going to be based on the Ukrainian story in North Carolina. But I wrote a really good op-ed on legal immigration and accelerating the path to citizenship that is those are here legally.
Yeah,
which would would bring in $49 billion to our economy in North Carolina, and these are skilled visa holders, many of them from India, and they're at our universities as well.
Right.
So I think, but at the same time, how do we? What do you think needs to be done to stop the migrants coming in? Because now the problem is they don't have enough courts to manage asylum cases. Many of them have COVID. They're poor. They're weak.
You don't need a lot of courts. You need an administrator to do a review and bring them into the United States. Come on, Steve. We also have a big problem in our Social Security and our aging of America. We got a bunch of old people here. Okay, our Social Security system runs out of money in 3 years. Why? We don't have any young people. Well, these are young people that want to work. Bring them in, let them work, let them pay Social Security. Come on, guys. I mean, the problem is the people in Congress are asleep at the wheel.
Speaking of Congress and everything,
we just wake these boys up there.
Speaking of Congress, and I'd love to hear Sasha's thoughts about this. There is a documentary that has been released about a great documentarian. I'm actually a big fan of Ken Burns, and he is analyzing one of the historical figures of our time, and he's actually showing both the warts that this gentleman had as well as the great things that he did. And he was a person of science, a person of definitely politics, and a person that was all over the place in terms of the amazing things that he did. And I was just wondering, from your standpoint, both as now a Canadian citizen and even when you were in Russia, what was the general overview and kind of thoughts around Ben Franklin, because that is who this documentary is on. It's on Ben Franklin, and yes, they do talk about the fact that he was a slave owner and some of his views, including catching a runaway slave, and they do talk about some of the good parts of his legacy as well as some of the negative parts. And he also has some very interesting thoughts that I'm going to get to Nick about later on about Mark Zuckerberg, because he has some interesting thoughts. Ken Burns does. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about the legendary historical figure, Ben Franklin.
Ben Franklin obviously doesn't need my endorsement. I think anybody who is interested in Ben Franklin can find abundance of information about him elsewhere. I would like to just put a little note is that when you say that we spend more time on Ukraine than on immigration, I would like to remind you that the immigration problem has been with us around for years, for dozens of years, and the Ukraine is something what's going on for a little more than a month. Ukraine situation is something what can affect all the world in some scenarios, which you know which ones.
And also, Sasha, we have a solution. I mean, the immigration, until we get our orders in the House in the United States ready for, we've been talking about immigration reform now for 20 years, and they keep dropping these bills and they die in committee. But with Ukraine, we have a solution. The solution is getting more ammunition, getting more weapons, getting more resources, and maybe the United States getting a little bit more aggressive in terms of getting in and helping. And
I have a question for you, Steve. You're saying it's so simple, yet it has not been done. Not a month ago, not 2 weeks ago, not 2 days ago. It's just not being done. So how you want to solve the immigration problem, which is obviously not so acute as Ukrainian problem? And also don't forget that there are about now tens of thousands of Ukrainians waiting on the border of Mexico and US to get enter, and they are in the camps and they're surviving there or so on. So there's nothing to talk much about this immigration problem. It's been there for generations and it will be there for almost forever, because nobody can make any money to speed up the immigration, to make it a cleaner, more transparent process. They don't need it. It's okay. So it's not perfect.
It's a problem they don't want to solve.
Sasha and Nick, hold on a second, because you say that it's not an issue, and actually Nick kind of alluded to it earlier and everything. There is several other, and I'm not dismissing what's going on in the Ukraine and Russia's horrible invasion of that country and what they are doing. But there are some other countries, including some in the African nations, that have been having some atrocities as well. How much are we giving to our Ukrainian citizens to come into this country versus those in, say, Somalia and some of the other countries that are more darker complected? And we can even look at Cuba versus Haiti and things along those lines. So yes, there is an issue when people that are of a more European citizen-like background are being accepted into the country versus some that might be a little bit more brown.
I'm not so sure about United States and what are the priorities of United States really. But, country like Poland, for example, they're accepting only Ukrainian refugees. They will never take any Syrians or Africans.
They won't take Syrians, right.
It's just
Poland is for Poles only, except if you're from Ukraine.
It is
for Ukrainian and Poles. Okay.
It is what it is. You can complain about it. You may be not happy about it. I understand that and I sympathize with that. But it is what it is with Poland. With US, I don't know US priorities really, because look, Ukrainians are just waiting there on the border, and just like everybody else. So I'm not so sure that.
Why are they at the border? Why aren't they on flights to JFK? What's this?
Probably it's cheaper. It's cheaper to keep them at the border.
Yeah, I know, but the thing, this border thing is just the most stupidest thing I ever saw. Their immigration policy. Look, you know, Sasha, you pay high-level chess. You do a lot of technological advances like we do in Silicon Valley. There's a lot of difficult problems out there. The border and immigration are not difficult tactical problems, but they're governed by small minds and weak leaders. Weak leader being Joe Biden, small minds being people in Congress. They could solve the problem today if they wanted to, but because of their politically influenced by the political action committees, they're not going to. So it's like a problem that they love to keep, because if they want to solve it, they could solve the immigration problem.
Of course.
Okay, but they don't want to solve it. So why don't we just do this? Let's admit that we love our immigration problem. Let's be honest with people. We love our immigration problem. We love the racial aspect to it. We love chasing people around the borders and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And let's just admit it. Rather than
I'll add to it, Nick. I think people feel even a loser who cannot put together not $1,000, but even $500.
$1,000, right?
But he feels, but I am U.S. citizen and I have my voting rights and I have this and that. So let's those people just wait on the border for another 2 years, 5 years, or 7 years. So that makes average American feel much better about this.
That's exactly right. The average American in the United States doesn't have $500. Okay, so they feel good because we're excluding people from Latin America coming in. I mean, this is the insanity that exists.
Speaking of insanity,
and frankly, our leaders in Congress were not interested in solving immigration.
Nick, speaking of insanity,
why do we discuss it?
But speaking of insanity, I got another insanity for you. Coming back to the whole thing about $500 and whether we can afford it or not, and whether the average person can get that, and all of that nature. I lived not that far from several convenience stores, and when those convenience stores are lottery tickets, and I can tell you that every day I go in there, I see tons of people that probably cannot afford them spending a whole lot of money on lottery tickets that are supposed to be used for education, because there's supposed to be an education lottery in just about every state that has the lottery. And I'm not sure how much of that money actually goes to education.
It should go to financial education so that these morons won't buy lottery tickets.
So lottery tickets is a voluntary taxation. That's
voluntary taxation. I agree. I so agree with Sasha. And what we should do is the lottery ticket profits need to go into financial education and train people from elementary school to understand financial equity. And one thing the equity is not in is in a bloody lottery ticket. So the thing is, we again, it's something that we could do. In the state of Florida, they were going to use it for education. Then the state ripped off the kids and took the money for their general account. In Georgia, just to let people know from Georgia, they actually have a Hope Scholarship. If you get a B average or better in any Georgia high school, you get to go to University of Georgia, Georgia State, Georgia Tech for free. Georgia did a great job on their lottery, but some of these other states, absolutely horrible. And frankly, they don't get enough.
Nick, and I got a question for you. You live in a certain area. We won't name the area and all of that, but it's a certain nice area and everything. How many of those lottery tickets are in your area versus some of the more urban and kind of distraught areas that I find a lot of the tickets at and everything? So I'm wondering how many places can you actually get a lottery ticket at?
I've never seen. I haven't seen them, but I don't go around looking at lottery tickets because if you look at the math behind it, the math is bad for you, Mark. So in other words, it's a loser's bet. The stock market is actually a positive equity bet. So the thing is, if you're going to put money in, put it in the market in some form or fashion, even buy options, which is one of the worst things to do, but is it better than the lottery? There's so many different things you can do.
That's a great. The next topic we're going to talk about real quickly: President Biden forgiving loan forgiveness. We're not going to talk about it, but he's extended that to August because of rising inflation prices. What's interesting is the Minneapolis police officer who shot Amir Locke on a no-knock kind of into the premises, shot him. They couldn't find him. They couldn't find him guilty of violating any law of violating deadly force. Now, I don't know the details of the case, and I'm going to have to research that before I speak on the news about it. Why were they going in? Why was someone shot with deadly force? I'm not going to make any judgment because I don't know enough to talk about it. I don't want.
The guy went for a gun, so they shot him. I mean, so that's the reason
I'm glad you
now. The pretext.
I was back the whole time, Mark, and you.
Well, I'm glad Shaquille's back because I got a question for him. Because
no. Let me. I'm going to respond to a few things, Mark. So because you brought me back on, and then you left me backstage, and I was typing.
I did not do that. You need to talk to the other engineer because I did nothing.
Well, it must have been Nick.
I wanted to have a chance to say something.
Yes, because of this disgraceful, this nonsense that is put forward. So let's start off with Nick, and then I'll go around at all the things that you guys said. So Nick says, how could you deny these people the right to work?
That's right.
They don't have the right to work. They're not immigrants. They're not people that have the legal right to work. And Nick, if you believe that anybody should be able to come into your country and be allowed to work, then you should have absolutely no problems with somebody who is as talented as me coming into America and not asking and setting up a company that in direct competition to your company, employing people who are outside of America at 1/10 of the wages and driving you out of your business.
I don't have a problem with you coming in at all.
At all.
I don't have a problem with you coming in at all, but you're not driving me out of business.
But the problem, Nick, is that when you bring these immigrants in from these countries, and they don't actually have nice rainbow flag behind that, New York. When you don't have qualifications and you're just starting out, the jobs you are going to take are going to come from the poorest people in your country. Now, according to Mark Lee, the poorest people of the country are predominantly people of color and black people. Okay, hence the reason why
there are a lot of poor people in West Virginia and in some of the Appalachian areas. I never said that.
Conflict. What about all the conflicts in America? What are we doing about it? And then you guys sit there and you say, "Oh well, maybe we should, one, provide more weaponry to the Ukraine, and two, maybe what we should do is let more Ukrainian immigrants into America." Well, I've got an option for you. You don't veto Poland when they want to send those planes over. There's one option.
He froze up.
And two, maybe you stop the European Union from poking the bear. Okay? The great British leader who ran the Brexit party, didn't he say this in the EU Parliament? Stop poking the bear, stop antagonizing Putin. And as soon as Putin saw weakness, he did what he did. Now, he's wrong for doing what he's done. That's the international consensus, and I totally agree that he's wrong in doing what he's done. But you've sat there and you have antagonized him for years, and as soon as he saw weakness in the United States, he's acted. And what has the United States done about it? So to sit there and say, well, what we'll do is we'll just let Ukrainians come into America. Ukrainians don't want to come to America. Ukrainians want their own country. It's called the Ukraine. They want to stay there. It's their land. They're a sovereign nation, and they deserve to be able to protect their homeland.
That's the reason you let them in, because the thing is you let them in because they're not going to stay here. You give them status, and then eventually they're going to want to go back.
Well, if they're not, why give them status then, Nick? That's silly. You want to give them status so you can pick off the best and brightest of the Ukraine, just like you've done with the best and brightest of the Southern American countries.
Great. By the way,
and you hurt those countries.
Hold on a second,
Nick.
Nick.
We are not The View, just to let people know, because the people on The View, when I found Whoopi Goldberg makes $96,000, I was going, wow, is that all? Then when it was $96,000 a week.
An episode?
She makes $90,000 a week.
Hold on a second, Nick. But I do have a question to ask you based on what you and Shaquille were just saying. How many people?
Low, isn't it? 96,000 a week. How many shows is there?
A week. It's not bad. She does. I think she does like 5 shows a week.
That's only $20,000 a show. Why would you?
Yeah, that's quite a bit that she's making.
$20,000 a show is pretty good money for getting on rapping for it.
Well, how much would she have made out of Sister Act and Jumping Jack Flash and all that? She would have made more than that on an hourly rate.
I know. Even your
I'm
lawyer,
being nice to you because I know
your lawyer,
you're in an election.
They don't make $96,000.
You're in an election cycle, but seriously, look, you've got Democrats that are currently sitting there with the worst, the worst poll ratings that they've seen for ages, and instead of them sitting there and going, look, maybe we've got to come back to the mainstream of America. Maybe we have to focus on things that matter. They sit there and go, oh. Well, fuel prices, gas prices in America have been going up since before Putin, but it's Putin's fault. This has gone wrong. It must be Trump's fault. This has gone wrong. It must be somebody else's fault. There's no responsibility being taken. So somebody has to tell me what exactly have the Democrats done wrong then? Because according to them, they're perfect. Americans aren't buying this. The rest of the world isn't buying this. And it weakens not just the United States, but the entire West when you allow petty politics to come into these things. People deserve to be able to live their lives as best they can, to be comfortable and to pursue their own happiness. And pursuing their own happiness, Nick, is a much more important thing than allowing, you may as well let the whole world into America and not have a country at all.
That's why we were in the 1700s. in the 1800s. But wait a minute. Those were the drafters of the Constitution, which the Republicans worship. And that same policy of bring people in, they should be worshiping, but they're not. All of a sudden they change their mind. They go, well, they're not European descent, so we'll put a border and not allow them in. That's the reality.
Oh, really,
Okay.
Nick? Really?
That
Really?
is
And I suppose, as Nick, as Mark and yourself brought up about Ben Franklin's slave ownership, I suppose these are all these racist white men that set up America to be a country of systemic racism, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what happened.
The only immigrants into America were white Europeans. Is that right? Yeah. There's no Indian Americans, right, that have immigrated from India or from Asia.
They were all
Americans. None of them. They haven't come in. They haven't been successful. I know, because America's so bad.
First off, I was just bringing up the thing about Ben Franklin
would do a little bit better and would get better poll results if they stopped trying to tell everybody that America is a terrible, horrible, country. America's a fantastic country, and it deserves to be respected by its own bloody citizens.
No, I got you. Shaquille, all I was saying, hold on a second. All I was saying, Shaquille, which I brought up Ben Franklin, which actually Sasha just kind of like set aside, was the fact that Ben Franklin, and I would say the same thing about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, they had their flaws as well as their good points. And that's all the documentary is saying, is it is examine the entire aspect of Ben Franklin's life and everything. So that's what I was saying. And I was commending him for that documentary.
Other than him owning slaves, what was his great flaw, Mark? Or
they bring up a couple of things about things that he was doing during that time and everything. What? I mean, the main thing they do talk about is the slavery as the major flaw and everything, and even some of his foreign policy thoughts that he had at that time, from what I understand. And like I said, I haven't watched the documentary. That's why I'm planning to watch the documentary. But the documentary and what Ken Burns said he was going to do, just like he did with Muhammad Ali, was examine the entire spectrum of the person and everything.
It's funny how the Democrats of today love the sorts of policies espoused by John Adams, but don't seem to want to go for anything that Thomas Jefferson loved. Right? Funny how things change. Right?
Ben Franklin was a chess player also, by the way.
I want to get that book. I have to get that book. Ben Franklin.
This is by Walter Isaacson, who was also on the documentary, but it's a good book. And it's
Benjamin Franklin?
It's thick, so you actually have to learn how to read if you're going to buy this book, but it's Benjamin Franklin.
I'm going to get
it doesn't even cost you a C note to get it, right? Perfect.
Who's the author?
I had a 30% off sticker. So, I mean, I got a 30%
Who's the author?
Walter Isaacson. I've got a lot of books by Walter.
Good. I'm going to get it from the library. I have to return my. So, real quickly, I'll just say that before I close out, I was interesting that why Lin-Manuel Miranda did not include Ben Franklin in the musical. Was it because he wasn't a fighter in the war?
He was in Europe most of his life. You know, in other words, if you could read the thing, he took off. He went to Paris, went to London. He hung out there.
Or maybe he wasn't around.
He was there for like 15 years, and all of a sudden he came back at the last minute and lived the last part of his life.
Maybe he came back. Maybe he wasn't in. Maybe he was out during those 20 years.
And that was part of the criticism. Shaquille had asked me that was part of it, was his kind of views of the world, and apparently he had some families things that were going on as well. Like I said, I'm gonna watch the documentary and learn more about Mr. Franklin and all that. I was gonna bring up really quickly because I know that you're going to wrap up, Steve, and everything.
Yes, he was an adulterer. He slept with lots of women. He went back to Europe. He fought for American ideals over in Europe, the mother countries of their royal families. I suppose you guys would like them.
He wasn't an adulterer. He just
Meghan Markle, your new princess, is she?
He just had children from people that he didn't marry. He was not an adulterer. There's a difference.
There's a difference. But hold on a second.
I didn't realize how religiously conservative you Democrats have become.
We were very conservative.
Okay, Mark, it's ready.
We're very conservative. I know that Steve is going to wind up. The only thing I was going to bring up about Ken Burns, the person that made the documentary, is that he has also decided that, and I don't know whether Nick thinks about this, we can talk about it on tomorrow's show, but he thinks that Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, should be put in jail because he's thinking that we have totally messed up with social media. Because, as a matter of fact, one of the things that Ken says is that, first off, social media isn't social. And if you need proof, just go watch a bunch of teenagers who are in a room together, but not together because they're all on their individual devices. And he said, don't leave it on the teenagers. The adults are doing the same thing.
They should put Ken Burns in jail and his PBS Mafia. So what? I mean, the thing is, the way they
No.
organize and control that stuff, forget it. So whatever he says about putting Zuckerberg in jail, maybe he should go to jail too. Anyway, that's my thoughts.
Okay, fair enough.
Mark, put me on slow as I close out for my.
I will do
final
that.
take.
We will do that for sure. Taking everybody off but
Talk to
you.
you tomorrow.
Yep. Go for it.
That's it. Well, my last remarks is sort of a last jab, but really a last observation. As we close out the show, get ready for Tiger teeing off in a few minutes. I wanted to say that here in North Carolina, we are seeing the elections in full swing on the ground with very competitive seats. The United States Senate, one district is U.S. Congressional District 13. One of my friends, State Senator Wiley Nickel, is running in the Democratic primary, and he is running against Sam Searcy, a fellow Democrat who served in the Senate for one term. The most likely, the Republican nominee will be Bo Hines, a 28-year-old who is a former athlete that is running with the endorsement of former President Donald Trump. Also, the United States Senator candidate Ted Budd is being endorsed by Trump, and he's running against Pat McCrory, our former governor. And yes, Clay Aiken running against Nida Alam and Senator Valerie Fouché, although Valerie Fouché is now gaining some serious momentum as she just received the endorsement from Attorney General, who most likely will be our gubernatorial candidate in 2024, Josh Stein, and United States Congressman J.K. Butterfield. Rumors are that other congressional leaders are going to be coming to Fouché's defense, which will make her a very great chance of winning the Democratic nomination. Now, with that being said, I wanted to say that when you look at confusing times, to me, as a political analyst, I'm just confused as to why these Republicans are always going back to Donald Trump as the reason they should be elected. Why don't they run on their own views and their own opinions? When I see Ted Budd in front of a wall with a large gun saying, let's make America great again, I think it's arguably to say that, yes, America is having its challenges now. And this president is having his challenges now. Make no mistake. But I don't believe America was really any greater after 4 years of Donald Trump. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't he voted out of office? He lost the election. And I think that it's just really interesting to see that he is still such a big factor in these elections. He's coming here on April 9th to the Triangle on Saturday to speak at a Bo Hines rally. So this election will be a litmus test in many ways for President Trump's future. If these candidates win, then I think he's well anointed himself as the Republican nominee, and we possibly will see a rematch of Donald J. Trump versus Joseph R. Biden. Now, get me wrong. I'm not afraid. I do believe that if you're listening to this show and you support Donald Trump, yes, he had some good, innovative ideas, but not every one of those ideas was executed. And yes, President Biden has not had successes in Afghanistan, dealing with inflation, how we're handling some of the issues going on in our country. And so I want to defer to Shaquille Latimer, my friend, to say that I'm not attacking one side or the other. I just would like to see the political dialogue and the political discourse be about individual candidates and their vision, not saying I'm running and you should vote for me because I've been endorsed by another candidate. Only time will tell what will happen. But make no mistake, 2022 is going to be a make or break year for President Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. More to come on this tomorrow. I'll be not from PBS tomorrow. We're taking a couple of weeks off, and we'll be back in May, every other Friday from PBS Carolina. From our family to yours, we wish you all the best. Godspeed.